Good afternoon, everyone. Welcome to the second of our four webinars on effective trusteeship. Aaron Thompson is my name. I know you know that already, President of the Council on Post-Secondary Education, and it's my pleasure welcoming you to this seminar. I will tell you, many of you already know the importance of what you do and the importance that we have to have if we're going to see our state to continue to improve. Your job truly is, as a fiduciary governing member of your campus, is essential to us accomplishing all that we say we want to accomplish in this state, to have a thriving economy and have an effective workforce and have it in a way that really gets us to where we need to go. I'm proud to welcome my friend, Carol Cartwright, who's here to talk with us. And I'll introduce her and then just let her jump in. Carol, good to see you as always. Dr. Carol Cartwright has a distinguished career highlighted by innovative teaching, pioneering research, and national leadership. She was the president of Bowling Green State University from 2008 to 2011. And prior to that, she was president of Kent State University from 1991 to 2006. Her career also includes roles as vice chancellor, a vice provost, a dean, a faculty member, and now she serves as a senior consultant and senior fellow for AGB Consulting. Carol has held prominent leadership roles over the years and chairs several education-related boards, which only furthers her experience for today's webinar topic. I'm glad you were able to join us, Carol. I obviously have seen you do a lot of this over the years, and you're clearly one of the best I've seen at your work. Thank you for being here, and welcome virtually to Kentucky.
Thanks. It's really good to be with everybody. I'm delighted that you were all able to join us for this discussion of principles of trusteeship. Throughout my presentation, I'm going to be posing many questions. So I hope that you'll take some notes and be prepared to share some of your comments, as well as be ready to ask some questions. We have allowed plenty of time at the end for questions. Let's move to the next slide. I think it's important to begin with a clear understanding of the goals that boards have for their work. What are they hoping to achieve? I think that they're all trying to be strategic. They're striving to be strategic. In the board assessments that I have completed as a consultant, every single board has said they want more time to focus on the strategic issues. They want to learn how to be more strategic. So our discussions throughout the webinar will be aligned with that goal, building a strategic board. So how do boards know if they're strategic? How do they know if they're achieving this goal? One way to check is to think about whether the board is truly focusing on the institution's primary assets, the things that really matter. You see them on this slide. As a board, are you spending your time on discussions of mission and vision and strategic priorities? Do you understand, and are you overseeing the array of programs and the quality of the education being offered? Do you know what the business model is for your institution? And have you discussed its sustainability? Finally, have you built a genuine partnership with the president? Are you nurturing presidential leadership? Would you describe the board members as thought partners with the president? Let's go to the next slide. It's no secret that these are really tumultuous times for higher education. There's something in the popular press and social media every day that signals disruption. Because of these challenges, it's critically important to know how to function as an effective board, to know how to get governance right. Board members need to know about the issues that are currently affecting their institution, but they also need to be looking forward and around corners. They need to scan the national and even the international landscape and ask what issues are out there that might impact their work. Each institution exists in this broader ecosystem of higher education and society. Fortunately, on a regular basis, AGB convenes a group of experts to do an assessment of current issues that boards need to be prepared to respond to. My remarks for these next few slides are drawn from the AGB publication titled Strategic Issues for Boards 2022-2023. I urge you to download and read the entire report and also take a look at the one just published for 2023-2024 issues. Next, please. Most boards would agree that they weathered COVID, and they would likely agree that there's a strong possibility that nothing will ever be quite the same again. Will enrollments rebound? Will online classes become more established? What will happen to opinions about the value of a degree? Will everyone want to come to campus to work every day? There's no vaccine for the political divisions that have appeared and which some believe pose serious threats to our democracy. What about the future of academic freedom, institutional autonomy, and freedom of speech? Also, we need to recognize that the challenges that existed before the pandemic are still with us. And how will boards and presidents address these and other issues? So let's look quickly at the 5 categories displayed on this slide. Let's move to the next slide. Institutional vitality encompasses taking a hard look at the relevance of mission and program offerings, keeping pace with new technology, and being open to dealing with financial issues. COVID exposed frailties in our business model. Every college must consider the value and the relevance of today's job market in terms of the majors and degrees they offer. They need to be attracting students and appealing to prospective employers. You know that. An overarching concern here is the diminished public faith in higher education. Will taxpayers continue to be willing to fund public higher education? Boards should be asking questions such as, what are the strategic business issues facing us? Do trends suggest a need to rethink our business model? What changes would lead to greater financial success? Think about this category and think about your specific questions in institutional vitality. Next slide. Student outcomes involves focusing on retention to improve graduation rates, ensuring a sense of belonging, implementing programs to prepare for the workforce, programs such as internships, and ensuring provisions for mental health and basic needs. Data is really important here. Boards need to know the details about improving retention. They need dashboards to track the information. They need to understand that overall retention and graduation rates are a good barometer of how a college or university is performing. So in this category, boards should be asking questions such as, does our mission reflect our commitment to student success? Do we have benchmarks in place to measure student success? And what are they telling us? What steps are we taking to improve these results? What support services do we have in place to help students stay and complete? Again, what are your questions in this category? Jot them down and be ready to share when we get to the Q&A. Next slide, please. A third area is civic education and democracy. Boards must recognize the responsibility of every college and university to prepare engaged citizens, model civil discourse, and tolerance of diverse viewpoints, and stand up for freedom of thought and expression. democracy and higher education are truly linked. Boards should be asking questions in this area, such as, what are we doing to educate citizen learners who can fully engage in democratic practices? What are we doing to protect honest differences of opinion and constructive arguments? Does the board have a statement about expectations for how we relate to these external constituencies? Again, I hope you'll be thinking about your own questions in this area. Next, please. The topic of higher education leadership concerns the coming wave of retirements and underscores the urgency of ensuring that institutions are devoting the necessary attention to succession planning. Finding the right leader has always been one of the most significant responsibilities of the board. It is growing more difficult with the graying of the current generation of college leaders, and we're seeing more rapid turnover. Again, we have questions for you to think about in this area. Does the board have succession plans for the president and other key administrative leaders? What is our rate of turnover in the top positions? Do we know why it is what it is? What are we doing to recruit a wide range of talent for the administration? Think about your institution's issues in this area. Next slide. Finally, risk management. This is the fifth topic. Boards must be prepared to deal with a multitude of crises and flashpoints. There's a long list of significant risks to consider: financial, reputational, fractures in shared governance, student success, college completion, and health and safety on campus, to name a few. Universities have never been under as much external scrutiny as they are today, and expectations have never been higher. Boards need answers to questions such as, who in the administration leads the crisis management team? Do we have a playbook for dealing with crises? Do we have an enterprise risk management system to track issues before they become crises? What role does the board play in a crisis? What have we done to safeguard our people, our systems, and our data against cyber attacks? So again, think about your specific questions in this area and be prepared to share them later. Next slide. These and many other questions are important to raise and answer because at the end of the day, it is the board that is responsible for the vitality and sustainability of the institution. Boards have fiduciary duties to act in the best interests of the asset that they are responsible for. What is that asset? Well, in the case of higher education, the asset is the institution you serve, all of it. Its programs, people, facilities, finances, reputation, everything associated with the institution. In discussing fiduciary duties, we've discovered that some boards think only in terms of the financial health of their institution. They think that's all there is about fiduciary duties, but that's not accurate. Boards are responsible as fiduciaries for the entirety of the institution. I'm going to quote from the 2015 AGB Director's Statement on the fiduciary duties of governing board members. A fiduciary owes particular duties to the institution he or she serves. They are commonly known as the fiduciary duties of care, loyalty, and obedience. Taken together, they require board members to make careful, good faith decisions in the best interest of the institution, consistent with its public or charitable mission, independent of undue influence from any party or from financial interests, close quote. As you see on this slide, every board member has the legal responsibilities of a fiduciary, but as individuals, board members do not have authority. The authority resides in the full board, in the collective that is the full board. Next slide, please. Because the authority resides in the full board, AGB has traditionally concentrated its work on the full board. Recently, however, AGB published an important document that sort of flips the script and focuses on the individuals on the board. This relatively new work, which is titled Principles of Trusteeship, takes the position that a board is only as strong and effective as the collective wisdom and actions of its individual members. In the publication, which I recommend you download and read in its entirety, AGB developed 9 principles of trusteeship to enhance the effectiveness of each and every board member. Highly effective trustees are a prerequisite for a highly effective board. The authority of the board resides in the collective action of its members. But, and here's the most important part, but each individual trustee contributes to or limits the effectiveness of the board as a whole. Next slide. Higher education is an industry that is complex and unfamiliar to most trustees. There are some similarities in the corporate, government, and nonprofit sectors, but higher education also has a unique set of circumstances and structures. Board members only come together periodically. They don't work together day by day. They have different understandings about their personal responsibilities. That's common sense because it's shaped by each member's expertise, experiences, and expectations. Board work is a team effort, and everyone has a vital role to play. The principles to be presented here are a combination of attitudes and actions that all trustees should embody. Attitudes are about how you think and show up. Actions are what you do, both inside the boardroom and beyond the boardroom. Next, please. Here you see the principles sorted into 3 categories: understand governance, lead by example, and think strategically. There are 3 principles in each category, shown here in the outer ring of the circle. We'll talk briefly about each one. And for each principle, it's important to consider what it means to you in 3 ways. What it means to you as a fiduciary, as a member of the team that is the full board, and as an individual. Next, please. We'll look first at the category of understanding governance. As a fiduciary, you're charged to act in the best interest of the institution, to act in good faith, to make independent and informed judgments. You're a member of the team, which includes other board members, and it also includes the president, the faculty, and other partners in governance and leadership. Constructive debate is a sign of a healthy team, but once the board has voted, everyone should support the collective decision. As an individual, remember that board service is not a spectator sport. Each board member is expected to do the homework in order to ask appropriate questions and make informed decisions. So check yourself on this principle. What is your level of engagement during meetings, between meetings? Do you know what is expected of you as a board member? What do you expect from other board members? What do you expect from the administration? How well does the board function? What does it do well? What could it do better? Next, please. The board delegates primary responsibilities to the president, primary management responsibilities to the president, and primary responsibility for academic programs to the faculty. So here's the key question. Where does the work of the board end and the work of the administration begin? The boundaries are sometimes quite blurry, so boards need to work to understand the differences. As a team member, respect your partners in governance. You're going to be faced with thinking about issues that are outside your own area of expertise. Others will be developing and vetting recommendations for the board. Don't accept them unconditionally, but do respect the work that has been done by others who have more information and greater knowledge. As an individual, be a thought partner and sounding board by sharing your relevant expertise. Your responsibility is not to fix the problem, but to offer your insights. Next slide. Here you see some examples of questions that are more management oriented compared to those that are more strategic or governance oriented. Think about the questions that you have posed. Are they governance type questions? Do they get at the greater issues of framing and provide more catalytic discussion for you and your colleagues? What knowledge, skills, and abilities do you have that could be useful to the administration? Have you thought about how to share your expertise without crossing the line into management? How well does shared governance work at your college or university? What are the challenges? What responsibilities are delegated to the faculty governing body? And how does their work intersect with your work on the board? Next slide. Here's the third principle in the category of understanding governance. As a fiduciary, we want you to advocate on behalf of your institution and higher education. Be an active ambassador, but as you reach out, follow the administration's lead on messages and timing. Be prepared to promote the goals of higher education and the value of a degree. As a team member, recognize who speaks for the board and who speaks for the institution. You are a bridge between the university and its stakeholders. Get to know students, faculty, and staff, but understand that you don't have a license to do your own listening tour or schedule appointments with the faculty. This needs to be coordinated through the administration. You can dissent in the boardroom, but your work with stakeholders must reflect the board's collective decisions. As an individual, attend events and demonstrate active involvement. Being a board member means pledging a significant amount of time and energy. So as you reflect on this principle, think about how do board members support the president and the institution in advocacy? Do you know who could be helpful to the institution? And have you thought about how you can help the president gain access to that individual or that network? How would you react to a constituent who approaches you with a sensitive question? Here's a mini case study to think about. A community member cornered a board member in the supermarket to complain about a controversial board decision that was reported on the front page of the newspaper. The board member responded, thanks very much for your concern. I'll share your comments with the president and the board. The board had really agonized over this particular decision, and the vote was not unanimous. But the board members agreed that the process was thorough and they were happy with their collective decision. The In this case, the board member listened and responded, but didn't make any promises on behalf of the institution. And then he sent a note to the president and the board chair to let them know about this encounter. So what do you think about this example? Did the board member behave appropriately? Is there anything he should have done differently? What principle in this category was at play here? This is an example of appropriate board member behavior. He didn't over-explain, he didn't commit to any specific action, and he informed the president and the board chair. It's a good example of principle 3. Excuse me, I've got something in my throat. I'll try to move on. This is a good example of principle 3, the role of the individual board member in being an ambassador. He could have elaborated a little by saying something along the lines of, it was a good and thorough discussion with several points of view expressed, but I support the vote of the whole board. But essentially, he did the right thing in this supermarket encounter. Let's move to the next slide. So let's move to another category now. Lead by example. Here's the first principle in this category. This is about dealing with conflicts of interest. Remember that as a fiduciary, you act in the institution's best interests, putting the institution ahead of any personal preferences. Your duty of loyalty is to the college or university. Regardless of how you are selected to serve, you do not represent a particular group of constituents. Your legal obligation is to put the institution first. As a team member, be sure to preemptively disclose conflicts, whether they be actual or perceived. Many conflicts can be managed, but you need to err on the side of disclosing more rather than less information. And you need to be sure to step aside from voting and discussions when there are conflicts. You don't want to be seen as having a situation that potentially interferes with your objectivity and independence. Finally, as an individual, it's up to you to uphold the highest ethical standards. Your behaviors shape the reputation of the institution. So hold yourself accountable for your actions and insist on the same from your colleagues on the board. Some ideas for self-reflection as you think about this principle are, what personal and professional relationships do you have that could interfere with your ability to make decisions in the best interests of the institution? Also think about what organizational information is appropriate for you to share with others. Know what should remain confidential and know how to tell the difference. Next slide. The next principle in this category is to think independently and act collectively. Board members should know and understand formal and legal lines of authority, but they also must be free to make their own decisions. As a fiduciary, it's important for board members to constructively challenge and support the president, the administration, and committees. It's important to exercise independent and informed judgment, but this does not mean that you are acting unilaterally. Think for yourself, reach your own conclusions, share your perspectives. This is your duty of care. Remember that the board partners with and depends on institutional leadership. Work is delegated to committees, to the administration. So support those who have done the advanced work, but don't accept recommendations without questions. You should feel comfortable relying on the expertise of others, so long as you have opportunities to ask questions, challenge assumptions, and shape the outcome. As a team member, speak up on issues, even if it's uncomfortable. Ask relevant questions that others may be reluctant to raise. And remember that the value of the board lies in the different experiences that each individual brings. Candid conversations and a willingness to challenge are signs of a healthy board culture and lead to better decisions. Thinking independently happens inside the boardroom, but active collectively happens after the vote is taken and the board speaks with a singular voice after the vote is taken. As an individual, express your concerns diplomatically to the appropriate people at the appropriate time. This requires trust and a culture that welcomes robust discussions. Here again are a few questions for self-reflection. Does the board encourage candor and robust discussion? Think about that. Do you feel that all voices are heard and respected? Do you feel comfortable expressing your opinions? Is the board open to dissenting opinions? Have you seen evidence of that? Next, please. The final principle in this category is shown here. As a fiduciary, protect and promote justice and equity throughout the institution. Higher education prepares students to participate in economic, cultural, and civic life through the curriculum and through extracurricular activities that encourage personal and professional growth. Ultimately, it is the board that is accountable for ensuring that there is a welcoming and safe environment and that everyone feels valued and respected. As a team member, seek diversity and model inclusion. Consider diversity broadly, including, for example, socioeconomic status, alumni status, professional experience, as well as gender, race, and age. Think about how you can build a board that truly reflects the community, especially the community you envision for the future. As an individual, think about how your own experiences shape your assumptions. This is true for all of us. Everyone brings their own lived experiences to the table, so you should reflect on how they have shaped your perspectives. Some questions for self-reflection in this category include: what experiences do you bring to the board? What do others bring? And then what are you missing? Where are the gaps? How do your mission and vision support diversity and inclusion? To what extent does the board consider the impact of policies and decisions on different groups? Here's another mini case study related to this category of lead by example. For the past few years, the university has had a long waiting list for campus housing. A foundation board member, who is a respected real estate agent, suggested that the foundation consider purchasing an empty apartment building near campus to alleviate the housing shortage. She was surprised when one of the other members of the board suggested she might have a conflict of interest. She explained she was not the seller's agent and was just sharing information that she'd learned from a colleague in the real estate business. So what do you think? Is this a conflict of interest? Was the question appropriate in raising the issue? And then what principle is in play here? Well, generally speaking, this is not a conflict. The foundation board member would not benefit from a transaction unless there is some other undisclosed information, such as having a close friend or a relative that would benefit, being perhaps the seller's agent. It was appropriate for the foundation board member to raise the issue, assuming that that question was raised in a respectful way. We want board members to share information that might be helpful to the institution if they're not benefiting personally or professionally. And of the three principles under lead by example, it's principle 4, conduct yourself with impeccable integrity that is embedded in this case. Let's go to the next slide. The third and final category for us to think about is the one called thinking strategically. As a fiduciary, you have a role in shaping the institution's vision and strategy based on its unique purposes and the constituents it serves. Know your institution. Get to know the stakeholders, the students, the faculty, the staff, and the community. Let the characteristics of your stakeholders shape your thinking about the challenges and opportunities facing the institution. As a team member, understand the present state and focus on its future needs. Remembering your time as a college student is helpful, but don't let nostalgia for the past overshadow the needs of today and tomorrow. Stay informed about trends in higher education, such as those we looked at earlier. As an individual, become a student of higher education. Seek out information about higher education and board governance, just like you're doing by attending this webinar. Develop a working knowledge about issues such as student success, academic freedom, shared governance. A few self-reflection questions in this area are, what do you need to do differently as a board member from what you do at the office, what you do in your day job? How has higher education changed since you were a student? How is higher education as an industry different from the industry that you work in? Do you have adequate information to be a productive board member? What else do you need? Next, please. Next, we'll look at principle number 8. Strategic thinking is a generative mode of thinking. As a fiduciary, you're charged to make decisions based on the strategy and vitality of the entire enterprise, while making sure it remains relevant in a changing world. Know your institution and know how it balances the basic purposes of teaching, research, and service. Know what drives its business model, how philanthropy contributes to the mission, and whether the current trends support future vitality. As a team member, help define what constitutes success. Work with the administration to develop a shared vision for what success looks like. And remember that the board is ultimately responsible for the success of the institution. Ground yourself in what drives revenue, consumes resources, and poses the greatest risks. As an individual, focus your personal talents on significant strategic issues. You may be asked to be a thought partner or an advisor. Remember that you're working in a different context with somewhat limited information and no decision-making authority as an individual. So provide advice, but leave operational decisions to the administration. A few self-reflection questions for Principle 8. What areas of the strategic plan align most closely with your knowledge and skills? How do you contribute to strategic conversations? What is the board's capacity and comfort for anticipating and bringing about change? What will make the institution relevant for the next generation? Next slide. The last principle to consider is about asking good questions. Based on what we've discussed so far, it won't surprise you to know that as a fiduciary, your job is to pose the right questions rather than prescribing answers. So ask probing questions that frame problems, move discussion forward, and illuminate alternatives, and then really listen to the responses. As a team member, listen actively and seek to understand. Share what you've heard through the discussion. If there are disagreements, it should be a cooperative discussion, not a competitive debate. As an individual, bring your genuine curiosity and open mind to your board service. Welcome and value alternative points of view and contribute to respectful discussion. Challenge ideas, not individuals. I tell boards that there are no poor questions, but some questions are better than others. So think about asking catalytic questions that drive toward insight. For example, here's a question: what best explains our recent successes and setbacks? That's better than, do we have a balanced budget? As you reflect on this principle, how comfortable are you with competing perspectives? Are you open to having your ideas challenged? How does the board explore important questions that don't have easy answers? Next slide. Here you see some characteristics of board culture. While I haven't addressed board culture explicitly, I hope you see how these characteristics have been woven throughout the discussion of principles of trusteeship. Thinking about board culture is important because the shared values and perspectives of board members influence what board members decide and how they act. And finally, the next slide. I've posed some questions for you to think about throughout the presentation of these 9 principles. AGB developed these principles to empower individual board members to serve as strategic thought partners in governance with their boards, their presidents, and their leadership teams. Thanks for listening. Now let's go to an opportunity for your questions and comments.
Carol, I think I am charged with facilitating the Q&A today. My name is Lee Nimitz. I'm the Chief of Staff at CPE. And first of all, thank you, Carol, for a wonderful presentation. We are starting to get some questions. Let me encourage you to go to the Q&A menu item at the bottom of the Zoom screen if you have any questions, and we will get those answered. So our first question says, first of all, Mike Goss commends you for a great presentation, and then asks, what are the challenges to successfully recruit and hire a new president?
This is a great question. As I mentioned in the presentation, selecting leadership is one of the key responsibilities, some would say the most important responsibility of a board. It's important to know the characteristics of your institution at a particular moment in time, to think about what it needs in leadership at the particular time. It's important to be marketing the opportunity, so you want to describe the mission, the vision, the characteristics of the institution, its history and legacy. But boards also need to spend a significant amount of time thinking about, where are we as an institution? What are our successes? What are our challenges? And what kind of leadership do we need to meet the next phase of our development? I believe that good leaders can find themselves in the wrong situation. And the opportunity as a board to really think about not only who we are, but what do we need in leadership is key to having a successful search. And the search consultants that work with boards in these areas are quite good at leading town hall discussions, having focus groups, doing interviews, and then helping the board think through the statement that they want to make about the leadership expectations. And then think about the transition, think about how to bring that new president into the institution, get acquainted, learn the culture. Even experienced presidents are coming into a new culture and need to learn that culture and get introduced, get to know the key stakeholders. So the board has a role, even after the search has concluded, to ensure a good transition, and then going forward to support the president.
Thank you, Carol. We have a question about foundation boards and how they interact with boards of trustees. So please discuss the relationship between boards of trustees or regents and the foundation board of a university. So what are the opportunities for cooperation, and what are the boundaries of responsibility?
Let's start with the end of that question there, the boundaries of responsibility. That will really depend on how the entity is organized. Some foundations have responsibility for all of the fundraising activity at an institution. and the investment and the stewardship. Others have different levels of responsibility. So understanding what the entity is responsible for will go back to its basic charter documents, for example. The key really here is to be sure that there is a strong memorandum of understanding between the two organizations so that it's clear who is doing what and how the cooperation is supposed to work. At the end of the day, it is the governing board that is responsible for the institution, and that includes its reputation. So you wouldn't want something to happen on the foundation side that interferes with the reputation of the institution. So understanding who's doing what and what the cooperative principles are, lay those out in writing, have them approved by both boards through something like a letter of agreement or a memorandum of understanding is really important. The fundraising priorities, whether they reside wholly in the foundation or partly there and partly elsewhere, really have to be driven by the institution's priorities. And if you're mounting a major capital campaign, for example, those priorities should be approved by the governing board because they should be the institution's priorities. Foundations are enormously helpful to public institutions, and we want them to be operating very, very successfully because more and more the business model in higher education depends on revenue streams from philanthropy. So working to achieve that close, good relationship, knowing who does what the cooperative principles are, understanding at the end of the day, the role of the governing board is really very important.
Thank you, Carol. And this is kind of a good segue to the next question. Ed Hatchett asks, when you speak of business model, can you elaborate on how to communicate the tenets of the business model to stakeholders? And are those tenets of an institution's business model suitable to appear on the website?
What an interesting question. And it is an area where I think we need better stakeholder communication and understanding. Most people don't understand that the basic business model in higher education is dependent on an understanding that we don't charge what it costs for us to offer the programs. And we depend on some kind of subsidy to be able to offer the programs without getting all of our costs back through tuition. So we depend in the public sector on public support, state support. And in the private sector, we depend on the philanthropy, more so than we do in the public sector. So helping people understand first and foremost that we're not getting everything back through tuition that it costs us to offer the program, which most business people would think is a kind of a crazy business model. But that's how we've grown up. It costs more to offer than what we charge the students who come to us for their education. So we're relying on some other entity to help fill that gap through tuition and what it costs. And that filling that gap is the importance of state support for higher education. That's a complicated message, but I think it can be communicated. Experts in marketing and public relations and communication, I think, can take that basic message and help communicate it to various stakeholders. And it will help people see, I think, the importance of public support and the importance of continuing to support degree attainment in states and throughout the nation.
Thank you, Carol. This next question really is about new board members. Most board members will come to their new roles with very limited knowledge about higher education and the complexity of it. What are sort of some recommended first steps would you give to a new board member so that they can more quickly get acclimated and feel like they can make informed decisions?
This is also a very good question, and I know you have opportunities there for new board members to get oriented. Absolutely, those opportunities should be taken advantage of. AGB also has a free online board orientation course that you can take in different sittings. You don't have to sit through the entire course all at once. You can sit down for an hour one day and work through a module, set it aside, come back to it a few days or a week later, and take another module. And it works through some of the basic understandings about higher education. Why are we so concerned about institutional autonomy? Why are we concerned about academic freedom? What is shared governance all about, et cetera? It's also important for the institutions to be offering opportunities for orientation to their new board members. Board members need to know about higher education, but they also need to know about the history and the current conditions, characteristics of the institutions that they serve. Sometimes institutions will offer a mentor to new board members, an opportunity for new board members to have somebody who's experienced on the board that they can talk with before a meeting. What is this all about? Help me understand this issue a little bit better. Or after a board meeting, do some debriefing. And help me understand what just happened in that conversation. Why were there so many different points of view? Having that experienced board member as a sort of thought partner for a new board member can be very helpful. So what you do as a state in offering orientation, what can be achieved by personal attention to things like the online course that AGB offers, and some kind of buddy system, mentoring process, et cetera. All of those can be very helpful in orienting new board members. As I said in the presentation, people who are coming into board service are really coming into a new industry, and it's different from the one that they are used to. There are some basic business principles that are the same, but higher education has unique characteristics for good reason. There's a reason why we are so protective of our institutional autonomy and academic freedom and shared governance. And those are the three areas that most new board members find most perplexing. So that's where some focus should be.
One last question. One of our board members asks, student needs and demographics are shifting. We've certainly seen that nationally, and of course we're seeing that in Kentucky. And because of COVID, and I think even prior to that, more students are dealing with mental health issues, or they're balancing the demands of family and work. So where does the board fit into responding to these needs of this sort of shifting student population?
This is an area that I think falls squarely into the category of thinking strategically. Board members bring a lot to the table in terms of thinking about the future, and they can help institutions frame issues, help institutions understand where the board as the fiduciary thinks the institution needs to be focusing its efforts. The board doesn't actually write the strategic plan that deals with some of these issues you've just mentioned, but the board should be teeing up the big questions. The board should be saying, for example, to the president, as the president is about to launch a new strategic planning process, we're seeing all this data about student demographics. We believe that the plan needs to address how our college or university is going to deal with those changing demographics. So the board raises the big questions, frames the big issues, and expects the president and the administration to come back with reasonable, thoughtful answers. The board can say, I'm reading a lot about different ways of offering higher education, everything online, certificates, et cetera. We hope that you'll come back to us with some responses about how these types of issues do or do not work in our institution. So the board is framing, the board is thinking strategically, looking out, saying, I'm seeing this in the environment. What are we going to do about it? And relying on the president and the administration to come back with those answers. Because the board is not the higher education expert. The president is. But the board is ultimately responsible for the vitality and sustainability of the institution as a fiduciary. So the board should be saying, we need to be talking about these things. We need some scenario planning, and then expecting the president to come back. And the president uses a variety of methods, including a lot of stakeholder involvement, but expecting the president to come back with proposed solutions with strong rationales behind them.
Thank you, Carol. I am going to turn things back to President Thompson to close things out.
Thank you, Lee. Thank you, Dr. Cartwright. It's always a pleasure hearing you, and the knowledge you bring to us is really appreciated. As always, we work with AGB, we work with you, and we will continue to do so. So we want to thank you for today's webinar, and we look forward to talking with you again. The knowledge you gave here truly was hitting the head on for all of us who are serving in higher education in Kentucky, but especially these board members. So thank you. Board members, we want to thank you for attending the second one of these, and we know that you will be with us for two more. And November 30th, we're proud to present the SAC COC president, Bill Whelan. Obviously, you know a lot about accreditation reaffirmation, I'm sure, but if not, you're going to learn a lot more about it in this webinar. So please feel free to call on us for any questions that you may have about this. Heather will be following up with some emails to you. But then on December 14th, we're going to top it off with the legislative panel. We're going into a budget year, and it's going to be an interesting year in many ways. Clearly, this is one that's really micro, hitting you squarely into where you live. So I would hope that you would be with us for that one. We appreciate you as always, and we look forward to visiting with you on your campuses when we get there, but surely on the next webinar. Thank you so much.